Welcome back to the Legacy of Thrones. Tonight, we travel back beyond cities and kingdoms, beyond pyramids and parchment, to a time when our story was just beginning. Long before written words or measured calendars, the first humans were learning how to survive, to adapt, and to understand the vast world around them. They stood beneath enormous Ice Age skies. They crossed lands that no longer exist. They met other kinds of humans who are now gone, and somehow, through challenge and change, they endured. This is not just distant history. It is the opening chapter of you. In their footsteps are the origins of language, of family, of cooperation, of curiosity. In their choices are the roots of art, belief, and exploration. The deeper we look, the more familiar they become. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, let your shoulders soften, let your breathing slow, and allow your thoughts to drift as we wander back to the very beginning of our human story. Let's begin. The first Homo sapiens appeared in Africa about 300,000 years ago. We discovered, through a growing trail of fossils and stone tools that places our earliest known bones in North Africa, including remains from Gel Hood, Morocco. These people did not look exactly like us, yet they carried key features already in place, including a face that was becoming flatter and more modern. Other traits arrived later, like a rounder brain case, which hints that our species assembled in stages. Africa at the time was a patchwork of shifting grasslands, lakes, and deserts. Populations could spread, separate, and meet again. That long, braided history helps explain why our species is both ancient and still changing. Every human alive today carries DNA from those ancient African founders. When you zoom in far enough, family trees stop being tidy and start becoming a tangled canopy. Over many generations, lineages merge because most ancestral lines eventually end while a few continue through chance, survival, and children who also have children. Geneticists can trace certain threads like mitochondrial DNA that passes through mothers and the Y chromosome that passes through fathers, and they point again toward deep roots in Africa. The longer you look back, the fewer ancestors remain in the picture until everyone's history overlaps. That does not mean the world came from one couple. It means humanity is connected through many people whose descendants spread widely. In a real sense, your genome is a museum of ancient lives carrying tiny traces of where bodies adapted, healed, and endured. A tiny group left Africa and eventually populated nearly every land. Imagine a world where the map keeps changing under your feet. Ice ages lower sea levels, deserts expand, and green corridors open and close like doors. In that shifting world, a relatively small population of Homo sapiens moved out of Africa, likely through the northeast and into the Levant, then onward in waves. That took many different parts. That small beginning matters because it created a founder effect. A limited set of genetic variation traveled outward and then diversified as people adapted to new climates, new foods, and new diseases. They learned coastlines, river valleys, and mountain passes. They met storms, predators, and unfamiliar seasons. Yet, they kept moving. Over time, those journeys reached Eurasia, Australia, and eventually the Americas, Seoul, turning one regional story into a global one. Neanderthals and early Sapiens met, and they had children together. Their worlds overlapped in Western Asia and Europe during cold, demanding millennia. Instead of a clean handoff from one species to another, the evidence shows contact, and it was close enough to leave a genetic signature. Many people living outside Africa today carry small amounts of Neanderthal DNA, which means real families formed across that boundary. Some inherited variants are linked with immune responses, which may have helped newcomers handle local pathogens. Other variants are associated with modern health risks, which is a reminder that what helps in one environment can be costly in another. The picture that emerges is human in the deepest sense. Groups met at river crossings and rock shelters, and they watched each other, judged intentions, and sometimes chose connection. Our species did not travel alone through prehistory. We traveled through a neighborhood of other humans. The first humans crossed open seas to reach Australia astonishingly early. Reaching Sahul, the ancient combined landmass of Australia and New Guinea, required water crossings even when sea levels were low. That means early people had to plan, build, and trust something that could float. They also had to navigate island chains through Wasia, where land is broken into stepping stones, separated by deep channels. It likely involved repeated trips, knowledge of currents, and the courage to carry families and supplies into the unknown. Once there, people adapted to new animals, new plants, and unfamiliar seasons, spreading across a vast continent. The timing still surprises many listeners, because it places seafaring deep in prehistory, long before metal tools or written maps. It also shows what early humans were capable of, when curiosity and necessity aligned. Ocean water was not a barrier, it was a route. Stone tools are older than our species by more than 1 million years. Before Homo sapiens existed, earlier humans were already shaping rock into edge, point, and purpose. Edge. The earliest widely recognized tools colden appear in Africa well over 2 million years ago, likely made by early members of the Homo genus. Later came hand axes, often teardrop-shaped and carefully worked, associated with Homo erectus and its relatives. These tools were not random rocks. They show planning, practice, and a mental template held in the mind. Tool-making changed how bodies evolved too, since cutting and scraping can reduce the need for massive jaws and teeth. It also widened diets by making it easier to access marrow, process plants, and prepare hides. A single stone flake can carry the signature of a skilled strike, preserved longer than any spoken word. Technology did not begin with us. We inherited it on curry. Controlled fire changed meals, nights, and the size of our brains. Once fire became a reliable tool, it reshaped daily life from the inside out. Cooking softens food and unlocks more calories, which matters because brains are expensive organs that demand steady energy. Fire also makes water safer, hardens wooden points, and turns darkness into usable time. Around a hearth, a group can stay awake without constant fear of predators, which changes the rhythm of learning and social life. Stories can travel farther when everyone is gathered and listening. Skills can be demonstrated, corrected, and remembered. Firelight also extends work into the evening, from tool repair to preparing shelters. The archaeological traces are humble, like ash layers and heat-cracked stones, yet the implications are enormous. A controlled flame is a portable piece of sunrise. It helped humans turn harsh landscapes into homes and nights into shared time. Clothing let humans survive cold zones long before farms existed. As people moved into colder latitudes, bare skin was not enough. Clothing was not decoration first. It was survival engineering made from hides, fur, sinew, and plant fibers. The tools hint at the craft. Scrapers prepare skins, awls pierce holes. Later, bone needles appear, which suggests fitted garments that trap warmth far better than draped hides. There is even the strange biological clue. Studies of human lice suggest that body lice diverged from head lice after clothing became common, since body lice need garments to living. Warm clothing opened routes into Ice Age, Europe and Northern Asia. It let families travel with infants and elders who could not endure exposure. It also made long winter nights possible in places where fuel and food were uncertain. In that sense, clothing was a moving shelter, stitched together by patience and necessity. Cave art shows minds like ours at least 40,000 years ago. When you stand before ancient paintings, the shock is not their age, it is their familiarity. Artists use charcoal, ochre, and careful shading to suggest volume, motion, and even personality in animals. Some caves show layered images created over time, which hints at return visits and shared meaning. Hand stencils feel especially direct. A person placed a hand on stone and blue pigment around it, leaving a negative print like a signature across millennia. Many sites are hard to reach, deep in darkness, which suggests intention rather than casual doodling. The art appears across wide regions, from Europe to Southeast Asia, which points to symbolic thinking traveling with people. These images do not prove that life was easy. They prove that imagination survived alongside hunger, cold, and fear. Even then, humans made time for beauty, memory, and meaning. Some of our earliest ancestors walked upright before their remains grew large. Long before humans had big, complex brains, bodies were already experimenting with a new way to move. Walking on two legs freed the hands for carrying food, tools, and infants. It also changed how eyes scanned the horizon, which mattered on open ground where danger and opportunity both travel far. Upright walking is not just a posture, it is a full redesign from the curve of the spine to the angle of the knee and the spring of the foot. That redesign took time, and it came with trade-offs, including stress on hips and backs. Yet, it opened a path that later made long-distance travel easier and made endurance. Hunting possible in some places. In a sense, the first great human innovation was not a tool. Pakia. It was a stride. Footprints at Leh record a human-like walk in ancient ash. In Tanzania, volcanic ash fell like soft powder across the ground. Then rain turned it into a thin paste. And then something remarkable happened. A small group walked across it, leaving tracks that later hardened and were buried like a moment sealed in stone. When the prints were uncovered, they showed a heel strike and toe push that looks strikingly familiar. The big toe points forward, not out to the side like an ape's grasping foot. The stride suggests balance and confidence, not a clumsy shuffle. Some researchers even see hints of individuals walking close together, which invites questions about group movement and protection. These are not bones reconstructed into a guess. These are footsteps. They are direct evidence that long ago someone crossed a damp surface and kept going, never knowing they would be followed by us. Wooden tools rarely survive. So much of early technology is missing. Stone lasts. Bone sometimes lasts. Yet wood usually returns to soil, so archaeology can feel like reading a book with most pages torn out. Early humans almost certainly shaped digging sticks, throwing clubs, bowls, paddles, traps, and simple frames for shelters. Many of those would have been made from carefully chosen branches, then hardened in fire or smoothed with stone. Scrapers. When wood does survive, it is usually because of unusual conditions, like waterlogged ground, dry caves, or oxygen-poor mud. Those rare finds can be startling. A wooden spear or a shaped plank can instantly widen the picture of what people could do. It also reminds us that ancient life was not a world of stone alone. It was a world of plant fibers, bark, wood, and reeds. And most of it has vanished. Lucy's species lived long before Homo sapiens and still walked tall. When Lucy was discovered in Ethiopia, she gave the world a face for a much older chapter of our story. She belonged to Oralopithecus afarenus, a species that lived millions of years before Homo sapiens. Her skeleton shows a powerful mix of traits. The pelvis and leg bones support upright walking, yet the arms and shoulders suggest skill in climbing as well. That combination hints at a life spent moving between ground and trees, using both for safety and food. Lucy also reminds us that evolution is not a ladder. It is a branching landscape, with many experiments running at once. Her kind was not waiting to become human. They were already successful in their own world, shaped by predators, droughts, and changing habitats. Learning about them expands the meaning of human into something deeper and stranger than modern faces. Early humans had smaller jaws once tools started doing the cutting. When teeth no longer had to do every job, faces could change. Cutting meat with sharp flakes pounding roots with stones, and scraping hides with worked edges all reduced the demand for huge chewing muscles and thick jawbones. Over many generations, natural selection can favor smaller, lighter faces if food becomes easier to process. This shift also ties into cooking, since softened food requires less force to chew, which can influence tooth size and jaw growth. The result is a story written in skulls. Earlier relatives often had broad faces with heavy brow ridges and big teeth. Later, humans trend toward more delicate jaws and a chin that becomes more pronounced. And Homo sapiens, it is a powerful reminder that culture shapes biology. A tool in the hand can eventually reshape the bones of the face, not in one lifetime, but across deep time. Language left no fossils, yet our throats and brains tell clues. No ancient word survives in stone, yet bodies still carry hints about speech. The shape of the vocal tract, the control of breathing, and the nerves that coordinate tongue and lips all matter. Fossils can sometimes preserve a small bone called the hyoid, which anchors muscles used in swallowing and speaking. Brain organization also leaves indirect clues through skull shape and through the demands of complex tool-making and social life. Even without perfect proof, many researchers think some form of rich vocal communication appeared long before writing, because cooperation at scale becomes far easier with shared symbols and detailed instruction. Packing. Language also transforms imagination. It lets you plan a hunt that happens tomorrow, warn about a river beyond the ridge, or tell a child how to make a blade without placing their hands in danger. Well, once verb, culture can grow faster than genes. They become a new kind of inheritance. Teeth reveal childhood stress, diets, and seasons from long ago. Teeth are time capsules because they form in layers, and then they endure. A bad season in childhood can leave faint lines in enamel, like a record of illness or hunger. Microscopic wear can show whether someone ate gritty plants, tough meat, or softer cooked foods. Chemical clues trapped in tooth material can even hint at where a person grew up, since local water and geology leave a signature in the body. That means a single tooth can tell a story that bones might miss. It can suggest weaning age, which links to family care and birth spacing. It can reveal exposure to smoke from hearths, which touches everyday life, not just dramatic events. In archaeology, teeth are not just remains, they are biographies. They let us meet a child who lived long ago, and they let us ask what that child tasted, suffered, and survived. The oldest known burials hint at grief, care, and social bonds. A burial is more than a body in the ground. It is a decision, and decisions leave clues about minds and relationships. At some early sites, the dead appear placed with intention, sometimes in pits, sometimes in curled positions, sometimes with ochre or objects nearby. Even when the details are debated, the pattern suggests that groups paused their usual urgent routines to handle loss. That pause costs time and energy, so it likely meant something. It could have been respect for a person, fear of a spirit, or a way to keep a community together after death. Whatever the motive, it shows humans were doing more than surviving, meal to meal. They were building bonds that continued after life ended. When you picture early humans, it is easy to imagine only hunger and danger. Burials force a different picture. They show tenderness and memory inside harsh worlds. Some injured people survived for years, meaning others supported them. Bones can carry the quiet evidence. Have compassion. Archaeologists have found individuals with serious injuries or degenerative conditions who lived long enough for healing and adaptation, a broken leg that healed, a damaged arm that remodeled, or teeth worn down to pain. All suggest a problem that would make hunting and gathering difficult. Survival in those cases implies help. Someone shared food, someone offered protection, someone adjusted the group's pace. KIA does not require modern hospitals. It begins with patience, carrying, guarding, and bringing water. It also involves social choice, since a group under pressure could abandon anyone who slows them down. The fact that many were not abandoned is powerful. It means early humans were investing in each other, not only for immediate gain, but because relationships mattered. That kind of care is a survival strategy. It creates loyalty, skill sharing, and a community that can endure shocks together. Babies likely demanded cooperation because human childhood is unusually long. Human infants arrive helpless and they stay dependent longer than the young of most animals. That long childhood shapes everything. It pushes adults toward cooperation because one person alone struggles to provide food, protection, and constant attention. It also creates time for learning, since young minds can absorb skills, stories, and social rules over many years. In early human groups, that likely meant shared childcare. Older siblings, aunts, uncles, and trusted friends could all play roles, since extra eyes and hands increase survival. Long childhood also encourages stable social bonds, because relationships become the scaffolding around growing children. This is not just a sweet idea. It may be one of the engines of our success. A long childhood makes a species vulnerable. It also makes it adaptable. It gives humans time to master tools, landscapes, and language. And it gives culture room to accumulate across generations. Grandparents may have boosted survival by sharing food and knowledge. Humans are unusual because many people live long after they stop having children. That long post-reproductive life is not an accident in evolutionary terms. One explanation is the grandmother hypothesis, which suggests older adults improved the survival of their grandchildren by helping feed them and by freeing two parents to gather or hunt. A grandparent can also be a library with a heartbeat. They remember droughts, migrations, and which plants or places saved lives when times were hard. They can teach tool skills and warn about predators without risking a child's first mistake. In small groups, that wisdom could be the difference between a narrow escape and a tragedy. This idea also changes how we imagine early life. It was not only young adults in constant motion. It was multi-generational communities where age brought value. When knowledge and care flow from old to young, a group becomes more resilient. In that way, elders may have helped shape the human pace of life itself. And obsidian sources can trace journeys across hundreds of miles. Obsidian is volcanic glass, and it breaks into edges so sharp they can slice skin with ease. What makes it magical for archaeologists is that each obsidian source has its own chemical fingerprint. When a black blade turns up far from any volcano, scientists can match it to the mountain it came from. Suddenly, you can see a route that no footprints preserved. A hunter might have carried it during seasonal travel. A visitor might have brought it as a gift. A skilled napper might have traded finished blades for food, shelter, or partnership. The distance matters because it reveals planning. People were not trapped in tiny circles. They moved, they met, and they built relationships that stretched across regions. A glittering shard can become a breadcrumb trail through deep time, showing the scale of early human worlds. The atoll made spears deadlier, turning arms into launchers. Picture a spear leaving the hand, then picture it leaving with extra snap, extra speed, and extra reach. That is what the atoll does. It is a simple throwing lever that extends the arm, which boosts the force and makes a dart fly farther than a hand-thrown spear. With that change, hunting transforms. You can strike from a safer distance, and you can aim at animals that would be terrifying up close. It also rewards skill since timing and practice matter. The best throwers could become the difference between hunger and abundance. Atlatals show up in many parts of the world, and they hint at teaching too. You do not invent and spread a tool like this without demonstration, imitation, and improvement. It is also a quiet step toward later projectile weapons. It shows that early humans were turning physics into survival. Stone blades were swapped like tools and like social gifts. A sharp blade can cut meat, scrape hide, carve wood, and shape another tool. It can also carry a message, Taintin. In many prehistoric camps, archaeologists find stone blades made from material that comes from somewhere else, and many to amai. That suggests exchange, and exchange is rarely only about the object. Giving a blade can signal respect for another group's skill. It can smooth tension after a wary first meeting. It can help arrange marriage ties that reduce conflict. It can even serve as a promise, since gifts create obligations that keep relationships alive. Stone is honest too. A well-made blade shows mastery in a way anyone can recognize even without shared language. That is why tools can become symbols. They are useful, portable, and impressive. When early humans traded blades, they were also trading safety, reputation, and connection, one hand to another across long distances. Some sites show repeated seasonal returns, like ancient calendars on foot. Not every camp was a one-time stop. Some places were visited again and again, which suggests that people were tracking the year with memory and observation. A river might run high in one season and reveal fish in another. A valley might fill with migrating herds at a predictable time. A grove might offer ripe fruit for only a few weeks. Returning to the same site means you know when to come, and you trust that your knowledge will still hold. Over years, those returns leave layered traces, like stacked ash from hearths and scattered tools from many visits. This is a kind of calendar made from landscapes instead of pages. It also shows that early humans had long-term plans. They could think in cycles, not just in days. They remembered the timing of food, weather, and danger, and they moved with that rhythm like a song. Shells found inland show trade routes reaching far from coasts. Finding a seashell far from the ocean is like hearing waves in the middle of a desert. It tells you that someone carried it, treasured it, and passed it along. In many early sites, shells appear hundreds of miles inland, sometimes pierced for stringing, sometimes rubbed smooth from handling. These were not survival items, they were chosen objects, which means people valued beauty, rarity, or meaning. A shell can travel in a pocket, on a necklace, or in a bundle of gifts offered to strangers. Each handoff builds trust, and trust builds networks. Those networks can move more than ornaments. They can move news about water sources, safe routes, and friendly groups ahead. In a world without maps, trade is also communication. A small shell is proof that early humans were already connected across wide landscapes. That hunters followed migrating herds, reading landscapes like living maps. A migrating herd does not move randomly. It follows water, grasses, safe passes, and ancient routes carved into instinct. Early hunters learned to read those patterns, and that skill could feed a group for weeks. They watched tracks, droppings, chewed plants, and the direction of distant birds that often follow large animals. They learned where a river narrows and where a cliff forces a bottleneck. They learned the windy ridges where scent travels and the quiet basins where sound carries. This was knowledge, built from walking, waiting, and returning. It was also knowledge that could be taught from elder to teenager, from expert tracker to first-time hunter. Following herds required patience, teamwork, and courage, since wounded animals can be deadly. Yet, it also offered abundance. When people moved with migrations, they were moving with the pulse of the land itself, guided by signs most modern eyes never notice. Denisovans were so unknown that a finger bone revealed them. In a Siberian cave, a small fragment of bone looked ordinary until its DNA was tested. The genetic code did not match Neanderthals or Homo sapiens. On Lermai, it pointed to a distinct kind of human, now called Denisovan, known first as a genome before we had a face. Later finds, including a few teeth and other fragments, still left them mysterious. Yet their genetic legacy is loud in living people. Populations in parts of Oceania and Asia carry Denisovan ancestry, which means Denisovan ranged far beyond the single cave. One famous example involves high-altitude adaptation, where a Denis-derived variant is linked to life in thin air among Tibetans. It is astonishing that a vanished population can be detected through modern bloodlines. A lost branch of humanity was hiding in plain sight, waiting inside a finger bone. Early humans fished rivers and coasts, expanding diets beyond large game. Big hunts capture the imagination. Yet fish can be the steady backbone of survival. Rivers and shorelines offer protein that arrives on schedule, often with predictable seasons. Early humans learned where fish gather, where currents slow, and where tides reveal pools rich with life. Fishing also changes who can contribute. You do not always need the strength to bring down a giant animal. You need knowledge, timing, and simple tools, which means more people can help feed the group. Coastal living adds other foods too, like shellfish and seaweed, which can fill gaps when hunting is uncertain. Archaeological sites preserve fish bones, hooks, and traces of shoreline meals that once happened at dusk beside water. This shift matters because it shows flexibility. Early humans were not locked into one menu. They explored new food sources, and that exploration helped them spread into varied habitats where large game alone would never be reliable. Bone harpoons show planning for aquatic hunting in deep prehistory. A harpoon is not a casual invention. It requires choosing the right bone, shaping barbs, and understanding how water changes movement. A barbed point holds fast when a fish thrashes, which means the maker has pictured the struggle before it happens. In some regions, bone harpoons appear astonishingly early, which hints at sophisticated thinking far from the stereotype of simple life. Hunting in water also demands strategy. You may need to wait at a narrow channel, coordinate with others to drive fish, or travel by boat or raft to reach good spots. It can involve night fishing with firelight, which turns darkness into an advantage. Our puns also tell a social story. Making them takes time, and time is easier to spare when food sharing exists. A well-made harpoon is both a weapon and a promise that planning can beat uncertainty. It shows humans using design to reach into a different world beneath the surface. Grinding stones hint at foods long before agriculture. When archaeologists find grinding stones, they are seeing evidence of hands working patiently over meals that did not come from a hunt. Grinding turns seeds, roots, and tough plant fibers into something easier to digest and easier to cook. It can remove bitterness. It can change texture. It can make stored foods last longer, which matters when seasons shift. These stones often hold microscopic traces like plant starch grains that reveal what was processed there. That means early humans were not only gathering plants, they were transforming them. Grinding also suggests routine. You do not carry heavy stones far unless a place is visited often, or unless the payoff is worth the burden. In a camp, the sound of grinding could be as familiar as the crackle of a fire. It is a quieter kind of technology, yet it is powerful. It shows broad knowledge of landscapes, edible plants, and preparation methods that would later make farming possible. Wild grains were gathered and processed thousands of years before farms. Agriculture did not appear out of nowhere. Long before fields were planted, people were already collecting wild grains, learning which patches ripened first, and figuring out how to separate edible seeds from husks and chaff. That work takes patience, and it takes tools like baskets for carrying and stones for grinding. It also takes knowledge of timing, since harvesting too early wastes effort, and too late loses seeds to wind and animals. Some sites show evidence of repeated grain use across long spans of time, which suggests that people were building a relationship with these plants. They may have encouraged growth by clearing competing vegetation or by returning to the best stands year after year. Over time, those habits can nudge plants and people toward domestication even before anyone intends it. This is what makes early grain gathering so fascinating. It is the slow beginning of a major shift where foragers begin to shape ecosystems and eventually settlements. Honey may have been a prized energy source for early foragers. Sweetness is rare in nature, and a beehive is a treasure chest. with a sting. Long before sugar existed, honey offered fast energy that could carry a group through long walks and lean days. It also came with wax for waterproofing, for sealing containers, and for helping a flame catch. Getting it was dangerous work. People had to read the flight paths of bees, track them back to hidden hollows, and approach with smoke, patience, or sheer nerve. In southern Africa, rock paintings show honey-gathering scenes, which hints at how memorable and valued it was. Aches too. Honey also pairs with storage, since it keeps well and can preserve flavors. A mouthful of it would not feel like a snack. It would feel like a miracle. Warm sunlight turned into food. Cooking boosted calories, helping brains grow while guts grew smaller. Raw food makes the body work harder. Cooking changes that equation by breaking down tough fibers and proteins, which makes energy easier to absorb. It also softens texture, so chewing takes less time and less strain. Over deep time, that shift may have supported the rise of larger brains, since brains demand a steady, rich fuel supply. At the same time, a digestive system that does less heavy lifting can become smaller, which frees resources for other organs. Cooking also reduces parasites and food-borne illness, which matters for survival in a camp where everyone shares space and meals. Think of what that means for everyday life. A cooked meal can be eaten by children and elders with warm teeth. It can be divided fairly. It can turn a hard, risky day into a calmer night. Fire did not just warm hands. It changed what bodies could become. Firelight extended waking hours, reshaping, storytelling, and learning. Darkness once controlled the schedule. When a steady flame arrived, the day gained a second life. Firelight lets people mend tools, twist fibers, and prepare food after the sun is gone. More light. Importantly, it creates a shared circle of attention. Faces are visible. Hands can demonstrate a knot or a flaking strike. Children can watch and copy without needing to risk the hunt. A fire also invites talk because everyone is gathered and still plans can be made for tomorrow. Old events can be retold in ways that teach without scolding. In that pool of light, a group becomes more than individuals resting near each other. It becomes a learning system, even mood shifts. A flame gives comfort in cold seasons, and it pushes back fear from the edges of the night. The first classrooms may have been camps lit by embers. Smoke protected camps by driving away biting insects at night. A camp near water is a good idea until the mosquitoes arrive. Smoke changes that. It confuses insects that track breath and skin scent, and it makes a sleeping group harder to find. Work that can turn a miserable night into one where rest is possible, which matters because exhaustion makes every task harder the next day. Smoke also hints at planning. You need the right fuel, not a roaring fire that wastes wood and draws attention. Damp leaves, green branches, and slow-burning materials can create a steady haze that lingers. There is a trade-off, since smoke can irritate lungs and eyes. In Dinmeej. Even so, the benefit is huge in warm regions, where insect-borne disease and constant bites can sap health. This is a small practical detail, yet it shows sharp observation. Early humans were not only mastering fire, they were learning how to tune it like an instrument to shape comfort and survival. Hearths became social centers, where knowledge could move between generations. A hearth is a place that pulls people into a pattern. Food is tune. Cooked there, tools are repaired there, and stories naturally gather there because everyone returns to the same glow over time. That makes it a hub for teaching. A skilled napper can sit close enough for a child to see finger placement. A healer can show which plants soothe a wound. A parent can teach respect for fire, which is both friend and danger. Paths also anchor memory. When a Sioux group returns to a familiar shelter, the fire spot becomes a landmark. It marks home in a world without walls. Archaeologists sometimes find repeated hearth use in the same locations, which suggests routine and tradition. That matters because tradition is a kind of technology. It stores solutions to old problems. and it passes them on without reinventing everything. Around a hearth, culture can travel across decades, one warm night at a time. Charcoal layers in caves preserve ancient fires like timestamps. That, in a cave, ash and charcoal can settle into thin sheets, then get sealed by later dust and core sediment. Thousands of years later, those layers can still be read, almost like pages. Charcoal can be dated, which helps pin down when people used a shelter and how often they returned. It can also reveal what they burned. Different woods leave different microscopic signatures, which can hint at nearby vegetation and climate. Even the way charcoal is scattered can suggest activity, since a tight hearth looks different from a fire that was kicked apart or spread for warmth. These traces are humble, yet they turn ancient nights into evidence. A flame is usually gone in minutes. This charcoal can last for tens of thousands of years. That is why it feels so powerful. It is proof that someone once stood in that darkness, made heat and light, and lived a real evening there. Early humans used glue from plants and resin to create tools. A sharp stone edge is impressive, but a stone edge fixed to a handle is a leap forward. After requires adhesives, and that means early humans were doing chemistry with their senses. Resin has to be collected, warmed, and sometimes mixed with ash or fibers to create a stronger bond. Too brittle, and it snaps. Too soft, and it slides. Getting it right takes experimentation and memory. It also takes planning, because you cannot make good glue in the middle of a chase. You prepare it ahead of time, then carry it like a valuable supply. A hated tool changes everything. It increases reach and leverage. It reduces hand injuries. It turns a small blade into a dependable knife or spear tip. It also shows minds working in steps. Gather the resin, process it, shape the stone, bind the parts, wait for it to set. That is a chain of thought you can hold in your hand. Composite tools combined stone, wood, and bindings into one design. When a tool has multiple parts, it becomes more than the sum, on books, of its materials. A wooden shaft can flex. A stone point can cut. A binding can keep the whole thing stable under impact. Combining them creates a weapon or tool that can be repaired rather than replaced. If a point breaks, you can swap it. If a binding loosens, you tighten it. That modular thinking is a quiet form of engineering. It also demands new skills, like selecting straight wood, seasoning it so it does not warp, and choosing fibers that hold when wet. Composite tools also change how knowledge spreads. They are harder to invent alone, and they often require teaching and practice. A child can learn one part at a time, then learn how the parts work together. In daily life, composite tools make copies work faster, which frees time for other tasks. In the long arc of history, they are a sign that humans were building systems, not just objects. Twisted fibers show that rope making is far older than writing. A twist is a simple action, yet it unlocks a world. Two weak strands become one strong cord. With cordage, you can tie a spear, point, lash a shelter frame, hang food from animals, and carry heavy loads without tearing your hands. Rope, also, makes traps possible, and traps can work while you sleep. Fiber rarely survives, which makes its discovery feel like finding a whisper preserved in stone. Sometimes the evidence appears as impressions like a pattern, left in dried clay or on a tool surface. Those patterns prove people understood structure, tension, and durability. They knew which plants split into good strands. They knew when to soak them and when to dry them. Cordage also invites creativity. Those patterns prove people understood structure. Once you can bind things, you can build things. And the scale of what you can build grows quickly. The story of early humans is often told with stone, twisted. Fiber reminds us that the soft technologies mattered just as much. Nets and snares likely caught more food than spears ever could. A spear is dramatic, but it depends on being in the right place at the right moment. A snare waits. A net surrounds. These tools turn knowledge into harvest, because you need to understand trails, burrows, and animal habits. You place a trap where a rabbit already wants to run. You set a net where fish already funnel through current and tide. Trapping also spreads the work across the day. You can set multiple snares, then return later, which makes food collection steadier and less risky than close-range hunting. It also changes who can contribute. Older people, injured people, and younger helpers can all take part in setting and checking traps. That widens the group's strength. Nets and snares are also proof of planning. And you need cordage, stakes, knots, and patience. Nets. You also need restraint, since you build the payoff first and receive it later. That ability to invest effort into the future is one of the clearest signs of a modern mind. Some stone hand axes were made with striking symmetry and care. A hand axe can be brutally practical, yet many examples look like someone cared about more than cutting power. The edges are balanced, the shape is even, the work shows patience, planning, and a clear mental image of the finished tool. That kind of symmetry is not required for a simple chopping task, which raises an intriguing possibility. Perhaps these objects carried social meaning. A beautifully made hand axe could signal skill, discipline, and reliability to a group. It could be a way to impress a partner or earn respect from elders. Making one also trains the brain. You must picture angles, control force, and adjust after every strike. Even the failures teach you how stone behaves. When you hold a symmetrical hand axe, you are holding proof that aesthetic, judgment, and technical mastery were already sharing the same hands. Tool styles changed across regions, like accents you can hold. Two groups can face similar challenges and still solve them differently. In stone tools, those differences can show up in the shape of a point, the way flakes are removed, or the choice of raw material. Over time, these patterns become recognizable. Archaeologists can sometimes tell where a country tool was made, not because it has a label, but because it carries a local style. That is why toolkits can feel like cultural signatures. They can hint at who learned from whom, and how ideas spread between groups that met only occasionally. When styles shift suddenly, it can signal migration, contact, or a new technique that caught on. When styles stay stable, it can suggest dupe, strong tradition, and careful teaching. In a world without writing, stone can preserve identity. It can show community in the shape of a blade. Tiny bladelets reveal precision work done by steady hands. Some prehistoric tools are so small that they look like they belong in a watchmaker's kit. Tiny bladelets were often produced from carefully prepared cores, then snapped or shaped into standardized pieces. That level of miniaturization is not a gimmick. Small blades can be set into wood or bone to create a cutting edge with multiple sharp points, like a prehistoric multi-tool. They are light to carry, and they can be replaced one at a time when damaged, making them demands control. The napper must strike at the right angle, with the right force, and do it repeatedly, without wasting stone. It also suggests planning for repair, since composite tools work best when spare parts are ready. These tiny pieces can look modest in a museum drawer, yet they hint at sophisticated design thinking. They show humans turning brittle rock into reliable systems, one small slice at a time. The first needles led humans in fitted clothing for harsh winters. A needle is a quiet revolution. With a pierced eye for thread, it allows tight seams that block wind and hold warmth close to the body. That matters because fitted clothing turns a hide into something you can move in, work in, and sleep in without constant heat loss. Needles also open the door to layering, which is essential in cold climates where weather changes fast. They suggest planning too. To sew, you need prepared thread, likely from sinew or twisted fibers, and you need time by a half to stitch without rushing. A well-made garment also lasts, which means less time spent scraping, hides, and more time for travel, childcare, and tool-making. Needles appear in the Upper Paleolithic in record, and their presence signals more than craft. It signals adaptation. They help humans expand into regions where bare skin would fail quickly and where survival depended on staying warm without wasting energy. A good shelter was technology, too, shaped by weather and wind. A shelter is not just a place to sleep. It is a design response to rain, cold, heat, insects and predators. Early humans likely built with what was available, like branches, hides, grasses, and stones. In windy areas, low profiles and weighted edges matter. In wet regions, drainage and raised sleeping areas matter. In cold places, insulation and a protected entrance matter. The best shelters also save calories, since a body that stays warm needs less food. That makes shelter a form of energy management, not just comfort. Some sites preserve rings of stones that once held down hides or post holes that hint at frames. Even when the structure is gone, the pattern remains. A shelter also shapes social life. It creates a shared interior where children learn routines and where tools are stored for the next day. In that sense, building a shelter is building stability. Humans reached the Arctic with clever clothing, fuel, and planning. Moving into Arctic environments meant facing long winters, limited plant foods, and cold that punishes every mistake. Survival required more than bravery. It required insulation that stayed warm when wet, and a steady strategy for fire and light when wood was scarce. People turned to bone, fat, and clever engineering. Animal skins could be layered. Blubber and oil could become fuel. Snow and ice could be shaped into windrows. Hunting also had to change, since large animals in cold regions can be dangerous and seasonal. Knowledge of ice, weather signs, and migration timing becomes as important as strength. The Arctic also tests community. Supplies must be shared. Children and elders must be protected. A single storm can trap a group for days. Reaching and living in these places shows how flexible humans became. They did not just tolerate extreme environments. They learned how to make them livable. The first Americans arrived by routes that may have included coasts. For a long time, many people pictured a single inland entry through an ice-free corridor. Today, many researchers also consider coastal routes, where shorelines can provide reliable food and easier travel. Kelp forests, shellfish beds, and fish runs can support movement in a way that interior ice sheets cannot. The challenge is that ancient coastlines are often underwater now, so the evidence can be hard to find. As to Velaton. Even so, archaeology and genetics suggest complex timing and multiple pathways. People may have traveled in small groups, stopping at coves, river mouths, and beaches where fresh water meets the sea. Boats, or simple watercraft, could have helped cross inlets and islands. A coastal route also changes the mood of the journey. It becomes a story of tides, weather windows, and navigation by landmarks. It reminds us that the peopling of the Americas may have been as much a maritime achievement as a continental one. Sea levels were lower, revealing land, now drowned under oceans. During ice ages, vast amounts of water were locked in glaciers, and sea levels dropped, sometimes by more than 100 meters. That reshaped coastlines and created land bridges, including Binjia between Siberia and Alaska. It also exposed wide coastal plains, where people could live, hunt, and travel for thousands of years. Then the climate warmed, ice melted, and the ocean rose, again, slowly swallowing those landscapes. Campsites, piers, and footprints could now sit beneath waves, out of sight and often out of reach. This changes how we interpret the past. The map we use today is not the map early humans used. Many migration routes may have followed now submerged shorelines. Many rich habitats may be gone entirely. Lower seas also linked islands and shortened crossings which could open new pathways into new regions. The ocean is not only water, it is also a moving archive that hides earlier chapters of human life. Islands today were once hilltops on vast coastal plains. Coastal, when sea levels rise, the highest ground becomes islands, and the low ground disappears. That means some islands are like the tips of drowned mountains, with a missing world beneath them. For early humans, those vanished plains could have been wide, fertile, and full of game, with rivers that are now underwater channels. Travel between places could have been easier too. What looks like an isolated island today might once have been connected by dry land or separated by a narrow crossing rather than open ocean. This matters for migration stories, since it can explain how people and animals reached places that seem difficult to access now. It also affects archaeology. Its people, early camps may be submerged, and later camps may sit on higher ground that once overlooked a much larger landscape. Thinking this way changes the feeling of prehistory. Human journeys did not happen on a fixed stage. The stage itself shifted, and coastlines wandered like living borders. Human journeys, genetic clocks help estimate migrations, even when bones are scarce. Genes change at a slow, uneven pace. Yet over long spans, they can still act like a clock. By comparing small differences between populations, researchers can estimate when groups likely split from a shared ancestral pool. That helps in places where fossils are rare, where humidity destroys bone, or where coastlines have swallowed ancient camps. It also lets scientists test competing stories. If a migration happened early, the genetic distance should usually look deeper. If it happened late, the split should look younger. The clock is never perfect, so it is checked against archaeology, geology, and climate history. When those lines of evidence point in the same direction, the past becomes sharper. The exciting part is what it reveals. Migrations were not single marches. They were pulses, pauses, and returns carried by families who did not know they were shaping global ancestry. Ancient DNA can reveal relatives, ancestry, and population crashes. When DNA survives in old bone, tooth, or etruscan skull fragments, it can do something astonishing. It can identify family ties inside a burial ground. It can show whether two people were siblings, parent and child, or distant cousins. It can also reveal ancestry mixtures, which can mark moments when groups met and blended. Sometimes it even captures sudden losses. A population crash can leave a genetic signature, like reduced diversity, that echoes through later generations. That can point to famine, disease, climate stress, or displacement. Ancient DNA also surprises researchers by exposing hidden continuity. A place might look empty in the artifact record, yet genes can show that people stayed and adapted. There are limits. DNA does not explain motives, and it rarely survives everywhere. Still, when it works, it turns scattered bones into connected lives, and it lets long, silent communities speak through inheritance. A single skeleton can reshape the story of a whole region. Most prehistory is built from fragments. Then one discovery changes the entire outline. A well-preserved skeleton can carry a date, a diet signal, and a genetic profile in one body. It can confirm that humans were present earlier than expected, or that they arrived later than Weld. Local legends suggested. It can show mobility through chemical signatures in teeth, which can reveal a childhood spent elsewhere. It can even point to cultural practices like healed injuries, unusual burial positions, or signs of strenuous work. That is why one find can trigger new excavations and new debates. It forces scholars to rewrite timelines and to reconsider migration routes. It can also restore complexity to a place that seemed simple. A region might not be a dead end. It might be a crossroads. Sometimes the past waits in one hidden grave until the moment it is ready to be found. Some early groups vanished, leaving only faint genetic echoes behind. Human history includes chapters that ended. Some populations thrived for thousands of years, then disappeared as climates shifted, resources moved, or new groups arrived. In a few cases, their story lingers as a thin genetic trace inside later peoples, like a whisper carried forward through intermarriage. In other cases, the trace is gone, entirely, leaving only tools, hearths, and questions. Vanishing does not always mean disaster. A group can be absorbed into a larger network until its distinct identity fades. It can also mean moving away, leaving a region empty, for a time. These possibilities are hard to separate, which is why the mystery remains powerful. It reminds us that survival was never guaranteed. Whole ways of life could end without leaving monuments. Yet, even when names are lost, the evidence of their existence still matters. It expands our sense of how many human stories once unfolded. Bottlenecks show how fragile survival was during harsh climate swings. A bottleneck happens when a population becomes very small, then later grows again. In genetics, it can appear as reduced diversity that suggests many lineages were lost. For early humans, bottlenecks hinted periods when survival was razor-thin. Climate swings could shrink habitats, dry up water sources, or change animal migrations. A few valleys or coasts might remain livable while surrounding regions became difficult. In those refuges, small groups endured, and their descendants later repopulated wider areas when conditions improved. That pattern makes prehistory feel less like a steady climb and more like a series of narrow bridges. It also explains why certain traits can become common. When numbers are low, chance plays a larger role in what gets passed on. Bottlenecks are humbling evidence. They suggest our species was resilient, yet also repeatedly close to being erased by circumstance. Ice Age droughts may have pushed humans toward coasts and rivers. During colder phases, rainfall patterns could shift, and interior regions could become dry and unpredictable. In those times, water becomes a compass. Rivers, lakes, and coastlines offer steady resources, and they create natural travel corridors that are easier to navigate than open desert. Coasts add another advantage. Tides and shore ecosystems can provide food in many seasons, even when inland game is wet. That does not mean life by water was easy. Storms, and cold winds, and competition with other groups could be intense. Yet, the pull of reliable drinking water and edible plants would be hard to resist. Over generations, this tug toward waterways could shape migration routes, settlement choices, and even social networks, since river valleys bring travelers into contact again and again. This idea also changes how we imagine ancient maps. The most important lines may have been blue. Humans may have followed water like a thread through shifting climates. The Toba eruption is debated as a possible stress test for humanity. Roughly 74,000 years ago, a massive volcanic eruption at Toba in Indonesia spread ash across wide regions. Some researchers have argued that the aftermath could have cooled climates and strained ecosystems, which might have put early human populations under severe pressure. Others question how global and how devastating the effects truly were, especially in Africa. That debate is part of what makes the topic gripping. It is a scientific detective story that mixes ash layers, climate, clues, archaeology, and genetics. If Toba caused a major bottleneck, we might expect to see a sharp drop in diversity around that time. If it did not, we should see more continuity in human occupation and tool traditions. Either way, it highlights a truth about early life. Nature could rewrite the rules overnight. A sky darkened by ash would not be an abstract event. It would be hunger, cold, and difficult choices lived day by day. Climate shifts opened and closed green corridors across the Sahara. The Sahara did not always look like the Sahara. Over long cycles, changes in Earth's orbit and monsoon strength could transform parts of North Africa. Dry deserts could become grasslands with lakes and rivers. Those greener phases would have acted like corridors, allowing people and animals to move through regions that are nearly impossible today. Then the climate could swing back, water would retreat, vegetation would thin, and the corridor would close. This opening and closing matters because it can explain pulses of migration between sub-Sahara and Africa, North Africa, and beyond. It also helps explain why some archaeological records appear in bursts. People could expand when conditions allowed, then withdraw when the landscape hardened again. Imagine what that would feel like in real life. A road your grandparents used could become a deadly expanse within a few generations. For early humans, geography was not fixed. It breathed. The Sahara was once wet with lakes, fish, and grasslands. It is hard to picture fish where dunes now stretch for miles. Yet, evidence shows that parts of the Sahara once held large lakes and thriving wetlands. Ancient shorelines, lake sediments, and fossils can point to times when rain was far more generous. People could live in places that are now uninhabitable, fishing, hunting, and gathering along water's edge. The presence of wetlands would also attract animals, which would create rich hunting grounds and predictable seasonal cycles. This wet Sahara reframes human travel. Crossing North Africa during green phases could be more like moving through a wide savanna than crossing a desert. It also reframes cultural memory. Communities would have stories tied to water landscapes that later vanished, leaving only rock and sand. When climate shifted again, those same groups might follow retreating lakes, north or south, carrying traditions with them. The Sahara's past is a part reminder that today's extreme environments can hide earlier worlds. Rock art records vanished, animals that once lived in now barren places, on stone walls in parts of time. The Sahara, artists painted and carved animals that do not belong there now. You can see cattle, giraffes, and other creatures that require water and vegetation. These images are not just decoration. They are ecological evidence, drawn by people who are observing daily life around them. They can hint at what was hunted, what was herded, and what was feared. They can also show how humans understood their world, since the choice of subjects reveals what mattered. When the climate dried, the animals disappeared, and so did the communities that depended on those landscapes. The art remained like a message left behind for a future desert. It is haunting in the best way. A carved giraffe on rock is proof that a greener world once existed where sand now rules. It also proves that early humans were witnesses who documented change, not just victims of it. Humans shared Earth with giant mammals that are now long gone. Imagine stepping into a landscape where the biggest animals are not in zoos or storybooks, but right there beyond the next ridge. In the Ice Age world, people lived alongside mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant deer, and other megapora that could dwarf anything most of us have seen outside. Documentaries. These animals shape travel routes and daily decisions. A herd could mean food, tools, and warm hides. Yet, it could also mean danger if the wind shifted and a charging animal decided you were the threat. Even their bones changed. The landscape, tusks and ribs could become raw material for shelters, windbreaks, and storage frames. Living with giants also changes imagination. It invites bigger stories, bigger fears, and bigger ambitions. When we talk about the first humans, we are also talking about a world with creatures that belong to a different scale of Earth. Mammoths, mastodons, and giant sloths faced new pressures from people. When humans entered new regions, they did not arrive as passive observers. They arrived as clever predators with fire, teamwork, and tools that improved across generations. For large animals, even small changes in mortality can matter. Since slow breeding makes recovery difficult, a mammoth does not replace itself quickly. A giant sloth cannot bounce back like a rabbit. Hunting was not the only pressure. People also changed habitats through burning, competition, and disturbance near water sources. None of this requires a single dramatic event. It can be a long squeeze season after season until populations thin. There is also the human side of the story. Taking down a huge animal could feed many mouths and build social prestige. It could also carry risk, since one wrong step could mean injury or death. These encounters were not just meals, they were turning points that reshaped both human life and animal fate. Extinctions varied by continent, and the causes still spark debate. The great wave of megafauna loss did not happen as one global moment. It played out differently across continents, with different timings and different patterns. In some places, large animals declined soon after humans arrived. In others, extinctions were delayed or selective, with some species holding on longer than expected. That unevenness fuels the debate. Climate was shifting at the end of the debate, last ice age, and changing rainfall and vegetation can stress large animals even without hunters. At the same time, human hunting and habitat change can be powerful, especially against slow, reproducing species. Many researchers now look at combined pressures where climate weakens populations and human impacts push them past a tipping point. What makes this debate so compelling is that it is not just about the past. It is a lesson in how ecosystems respond to rapid change. The Ice Age argument is also a mirror held up to us. Dogs likely join human before farms, forming the first partnership. Long before grain fields and barns, humans and wolves began a relationship that would transform both species. The earliest steps were probably not planned. Some wolves were less fearful, and they learned that human camps meant scraps, warmth, and fewer rival predators. Humans gained something, too. A wolf with sharp senses can warn of danger, help track game, and clean up waste that might otherwise attract scavengers. Over time, those camp-friendly wolves would be the ones most likely to survive near people, and their pups would inherit calmer temperaments. That is the beginning of domestication. It is also the beginning of a partnership built on trust, routine, and shared space. Dogs became more than tools. They became companions, protectors, and members of the group. This bond is so old that it sits near the roots of our social world. A person and a dog around a fire is not a modern scene. It is ancient. Wolves that tolerated camps may have earned scraps and safety. Not every wolf could live near humans. The bold and aggressive ones would cause conflict, and the fearful ones would flee. The middle path, cautious but curious, could pay off. A camp offers leftovers, and even small scraps matter in hard seasons. It also offers a strange kind of protection. Humans drive off rivals, and fire can keep larger predators at bay. For a wolf willing to hover at the edge of light, the risk could be worth it. Over time, the wolves that handled camp life best would raise pups in that same shadow world, learning the rhythms of human movement and noise. That does not mean early humans were handing out treats. It likely involved tension, warning shouts, and moments of violence. Yet, the long trend points toward coexistence. This is what makes it fascinating. Domestication can begin as a negotiation. A wild animal chooses to change its behavior, and a human community chooses to allow it. The first step toward dogs may have been a wolf that did not run. Domestication changed both species, shaping behavior and even faces. When dogs became part of human life, evolution began working in two directions. Dogs changed as calmer individuals thrived near people. Over generations, selection favored traits like reduced fear, increased attention to human cues, and a willingness to cooperate. Physical changes followed since behavior and development are linked. Many domesticated animals show shifts in coat patterns, ear shape, and facial structure, and dogs are no exception. Humans change too, though in subtler ways. Living with animals that could alert, track, and guard may have altered how groups traveled and how they managed risk at night. It may have affected hunting strategies and the safety of children near camp. It also reshaped emotion. Bonding with another species strengthens empathy and teaches a new kind of communication, one based on gesture, tone, and shared routine. Domestication is not only a scientific process, it is a relationship that rewired daily life. The dog is not just an animal in our story, it is a co-author. Early humans probably lived in bands with dog, flexible roles and alliances. Instead of crowded cities, most early life likely unfolded in small bands that could move when resources shifted. These groups were not rigid hierarchies. They had to be adaptable since a storm, an injury, or a failed hunt could change priorities overnight. Roles could flex with age, skill, and season. One person might be a hunter in summer and a toolmaker in winter. Another might be a healer, a storyteller, or the best at finding water. Bands also needed allies. A friendly neighboring group can mean shared information, marriage ties, and support during crisis. That creates a wider social world that extends beyond any single campsite. It also creates politics in the simplest sense. People remember favors and insults. They balance cooperation with caution. Living in bands means your survival depends on relationships you can maintain without written contracts. It is social intelligence under pressure, and it may be one of the strongest forces, with wear, that shape the human mind. Sharing food reduced risk, turning luck into community survival. Hunting and gathering can be unpredictable. One person may return with plenty, another may return empty-handed, and neither result is a reliable measure of effort. Walls. Food sharing turns that randomness into stability. It spreads calories across the group, which helps children grow, helps injured people heal, and helps everyone avoid desperate decisions. Sharing also creates reputation. A generous hunter can earn trust, and trust becomes support when that hunter has a bad week. This is not charity in the modern sense. It is a strategy that makes a small community resilient. It also changes the emotional texture of life. Meals become social events, where stories are told and plans are made. Rules emerge, even without writing, about who gets what and why. Those rules can be negotiated, argued, and enforced through approval or shame. In a band, food is not only nutrition, it is relationship. When people share, they are building a safety net, out of habit and memory. Gossip may have helped enforce fairness without written laws. In a small group, everyone notices everything. Who shares, who hoards, who boasts, who keeps promises. That attention can become a powerful social tool. Talking about behavior is a way to warn others, to reward good partners, and to pressure selfish people to change. You do not need a courtroom when reputation travels faster than footsteps. Gossip also spreads. Practical information, like who knows the best flint source, or who stays calm in danger. It helps a band coordinate without formal titles. It can even prevent violence, since public opinion can settle disputes before they become fights. Of course, it can be cruel too, and it can punish the wrong person. That risk is part of what makes it believable. Gossip is a human force because it is messy, emotional, and effective. In the deep past, it may have acted like an invisible law code, shaped by voices around a fire. Social life was not only muscle and tools, it was conversation, and conversation has power. Ritual gatherings could link groups, spreading mates, news, and tools. And, when bands live apart for much of the year, meeting matters. A gathering can renew friendships, reduce conflict, and create new bonds that keep travel safer. It can also solve practical problems. Partners can be found, which reduces inbreeding and strengthens alliances between groups. News can spread about migrating herds, dangerous rivals, or waterholes that have dried up. Skills can be shared too, since seeing a new tool technique in person is more convincing than hearing about it. Ritual adds structure to these meetings. Songs, dances, shared meals, and repeated traditions can make strangers feel like part of a wider world. They turn a risky encounter into something expected and meaningful. Archaeological sites sometimes show signs of repeated use by many people, which hints at gatherings that were larger than a single band. These events would have been electric. For early humans, a gathering could be the closest thing to a festival, a market, and a family reunion all at once. Musical instruments show that sound was part of early culture. Not all survival leaves sharp edges. Sometimes it leaves rhythm. Archaeologists have found ancient instruments and sound-making objects that suggest people were shaping noise into something intentional. Music can coordinate movement, soothe infants, and pull a group into the same emotional weather. It can also mark moments that matter, like departures, reunions, or mourning, even when no written words exist. Imagine a night where the wind is loud and the world feels uncertain. A repeated beat can steady nerves and make strangers feel like kin. Instruments also imply craft. You must choose a material, shape it, and test it, which means time was set aside for more than calories and prav. That choice is revealing. When people invest effort in sound, they're investing in connection. In deep prehistory, music may have been a kind of social glue carried on breath and fingertips. Flutes, made from bone, suggest melody was valued in deep prehistory. A bone flute begins with a decision that has nothing to do with hunting. From tree, someone selects a hollow bone, then carefully opens finger holes at positions that produce a usable scale. That requires experimentation and memory, because a hole placed wrong cannot be unplaced. It also requires breath control and a listening ear, since the instrument only becomes real when it sings. When such flutes appear in archaeological sites, they hint at evenings shaped by melody, not only by work. A tune can travel across a camp faster than speech. It can calm a child, invite dancing, or hold attention while a story unfolds. It can even become a signature, since a familiar melody identifies a group before faces are visible. The surprising part is how familiar this is. A flute is a human wish made audible. Unlike it says people wanted beauty, variation, and emotional color. Even in hard times, rhythmic drumming could travel far, carrying signals through dark forests. A drum is not just music, it is a tool for distance. In dense woods or across rolling terrain, a steady beat can cut through darkness when voices fail. Different patterns can mean different things, like an announcement, a warning, or a call to gather. You do not need a written code. You need shared habits and ears trained to recognize them. Drumming also turns a scattered group into one moving body. Hunters can coordinate steps. Camp members can keep time for work, like pounding plants or processing hides. Rhythm makes labor easier because bodies fall into sync. It can also build courage, since a strong beak can push fear to the edges. The materials are simple, like stretched hide, hollow locks, or the ground itself. Yet, the effect is powerful. A drum beat is a message you feel in your chest before you understand it. Storytelling likely preserved survival lessons better than any single teacher. A story can carry instructions without sounding like instructions. He can warn about a river that rises fast, a predator that hunts differently, or a plant that looks harmless until it is not. Instead of listing rules, a story ties knowledge to characters, mistakes, and consequences. That makes it memorable, especially for children who learn best through emotion and repetition. In a mobile world, stories also travel easily. You can carry them without tools, and you can share them with visitors who bring new knowledge in return. A tale can preserve a route across a landscape, a past drought, or the signs that winter is arriving early. It can also teach ethics, like when sharing saves the group, and when selfishness brings trouble. Storytelling is not fluff. It is storage. It is how a band can keep a long memory even when individual elders die. In that sense, stories are technology built from voice and attention. Laughter and play are ancient social tools, not modern luxuries. When life is harsh, it is easy to imagine people as grim. Yet, laughter can be a survival skill. It reduces tension after danger. It repairs small conflicts before they split a group. It signals safety, since animals rarely laugh when they are under immediate threat. Play does something similar. It lets young people practice movement, strength, and social negotiation without deadly stakes. Don't-alls. A mock chase teaches quick turns. A wrestling match teaches limits and trust. Even teasing can test boundaries and reveal who is sensitive, who is brave, and who needs support. Laughter also builds belonging. When a group laughs together, it shares a moment that outsiders do not fully enter, and that strengthens bonds. This matters because early humans depended on cooperation every day. Food, shelter, and childcare all ran on trust. Laughter and play help create that trust in a way that speeches cannot. They are the soft wiring of a resilient community. Playful learning may have trained young minds for complex cooperation. Human childhood is long, and that long stretch needs filling. Play is one of the smartest ways nature fills it. Through games, children rehearse adult skills in pieces. They practice taking turns, reading expressions, and predicting what someone else will do next. Those are the same mental skills needed for coordinated hunts, fair sharing, and conflict resolution. Play also allows safe failure. A child can misjudge distance in a game and learn without the cost of a real fall on stone or a real encounter with a dangerous animal. Many games likely included imitation. Children copy tool gestures with sticks, copy gathering routines, and copy the sounds of adults in conversation. That imitation becomes culture passed on without formal lessons. The result is a mind trained for teamwork. When grown, these children can fit into a band that relies on quick trust and shared plans. Play is not wasted time. It is rehearsal for survival in a social species. Tactic. Early humans feared predators, yet they also hunted the biggest animals. To live in early landscapes was to share them with teeth and claws. Big cats, hyenas, and other predators could steal food, stalk children, or attack the vulnerable. Fear was reasonable. Yet, humans also aimed their tools at enormous prey. But the tools and the liquor. Sometimes animals that could kill with a single kick or charge. That choice reveals something striking. Humans were willing to accept danger in exchange for payoff, and they learned to manage risk with planning rather than brute strength. They could pick locations where escape routes were clear. They could choose moments when an animal was weakened by age, injury, or terrain. They could rely on teamwork where one mistake did not end the hunt. This tension between fear and boldness shaped human behavior. It encouraged alertness, communication, and courage that was shared, not solitary. Early humans did not dominate nature by being fearless. They did it by being afraid and acting anyway with strategy. Spear wounds on fossils show close contact with dangerous prey. Some ancient animal bones carry marks that look like punctures and embedded points, which suggests spears met flesh at close range. That matters because it implies hunts where humans approached animals that could fight back. A spear thrown from far away is one thing. A spear used at short distance is another. It demands coordination, since hunters must position themselves to avoid a sudden turn or a stampede. It also demands commitment, because once you are close, the hesitation is costly. These wounds can also hint at repeated encounters, since a single site may preserve multiple animals with similar injuries. That suggests a seen-in, learned method, not an accident. The remains are silent, yet they speak of adrenaline, shouting, and the moment when a group decides to step forward. They also speak of skill. A well-placed strike requires knowing anatomy, timing, and how an animal moves when scared. Fossil wounds turn prehistoric hunting from an idea into an event. Some hunting required planning traps, not just bravery. At the moment, bravery is loud, but planning is often quieter and more powerful. Traps and drives, and wanhiriki, can turn a difficult hunt into a controlled sequence. People could guide animals toward a cliff, a narrow pass, or an enclosure where escape is limited. They could dig pits, build barriers, or use fire and noise to shape a movement. These methods rely on understanding behavior. You must know how an animal flees, where it hesitates, and what it refuses to cross. They also rely on cooperation, since many hands are needed to build, to wait in position, and to act in the right order. Planning traps changes the risk balance. Instead of a chaotic clash, the danger is spread across traps, time, with fewer moments where a single person stands alone. It also creates surplus when it works, since a successful drive can yield more meat than a single spear strike. This kind of hunting shows human minds reaching forward. The real weapon is the plan. Fire could protect camps, creating safe circles in the night. In darkness, a small flame can feel like a wall. Many animals, their role, hesitate around fire, especially when it is paired with human voices and movement. That makes a hearth more than a cooking place. Paired, it becomes defense. A ring of light also changes sleep. People can rest more deeply when the edges of camp are visible. And when a watcher can tend the fire through the night, fire also signals to other humans, which can be comforting or risky depending on who is nearby. Managing that risk becomes part of the skill. You need fuel ready. You need embers kept alive through wind and rain. You need rules about children and sparks. Over time, those habits turn into tradition, and tradition becomes safety. The idea is simple, yet it is profound. With fire, humans could claim a patch of darkness and make it their own. The night did not disappear, but it stepped back. Sleeping in groups reduced risk from big cats and other threats. Night is when mistakes become expensive. A lone sleeper is quiet, easy to stalk, and slow to react. A group changes the math. More ears catch the snap of a twig. More eyes notice a shadow moving wrong. If danger comes close, several adults can shout, throw stones, and rush together, which is far more intimidating than one person rising in panic. Group sleeping also lets people rotate watch, so someone stays alert while others recover. That recovery matters because exhaustion makes hunters sloppy and makes children harder to protect. Even the layout of a camp can become a strategy with the most vulnerable placed toward the center and the edges guarded by adults and tools. Over many generations, this would shape habits, stories, and rules about where you lie down. Safety was not a wall. It was a circle of bodies choosing to stay close. Parasites shaped behavior from grooming to camp hygiene. It is easy to focus on dramatic threats like storms and predators. Yet tiny enemies may have been constant. Lice, ticks, fleas, and intestinal worms can drain energy, spread disease, and make sleep miserable. Over time, this pressure can shape daily routines. Grooming becomes more than comfort. It becomes prevention and care. Camps also meet smart habits. Waste must be placed away from living areas. Water sources must be protected. Bedding must be aired or replaced. Smoke from fires can help, and so can choosing windy ridges where insects struggle to gather. Even clothing introduces new challenges, since fabric can shelter pests unless it is cleaned and dried. Parasite pressure also encourages cooperation because one person's hygiene affects everyone nearby. A child with bites will scratch and bleed. A sick adult cannot forage well. In this way, health practices become social practices. 3. The smallest organisms can quietly steer the evolution of habits, and those habits can be the difference between thriving and fading. Tattoos may be ancient, though skin rarely survives to prove it. And Tokul Kanfoti. Skin is one of the first things to vanish, which makes body art hard to trace. Even so, there are strong hints that marking the body is a very old human impulse. Some ancient tools look suited for puncturing, and some cultures with deep roots have long used pigments for permanent or near-permanent marks. In rare cases, preserved bodies show tattoos directly, and they remind us that the practice can carry identity, status, protection, or memory. A tattoo can mark adulthood. It can record belonging to tati, a group. It can honor a hunt or a loss. It can also serve as a visible promise, since you cannot hide it easily in a small, locked band. What makes this fascinating is how personal it is. Tools and hearths show what people did. Body marks suggest how people wanted to be seen. Even before writing existed, it is history carried on the self. Scarification and ornaments could signal belonging without a spoken word. When groups meet, the first question is often safety. Are these people friendly? Are they rivals? In a world without passports or flags, bodies can become signals. scarification patterns, hairstyles, beads, pendants, and paint can all communicate identity at a glance. They can say, "I am from this river. I share your allies. I belong to the people who honor this ancestor." Ornaments also carry stories of travel and skill. A proda, bead made from a rare material, suggests far-reaching connections. A carefully shaped pendant suggests patience and mastery. These signals reduce uncertainty, and they can prevent violence by making intentions legible before anyone is close enough to strike. They also help hold a community together across time. Since children grow into the same marks and learn what they mean, identity becomes visible, portable, and resilient. In that sense, adornment is not decoration, it is communication that walks. The first maps may have been songs describing routes and landmarks. A psalm is easy to carry and hard to lose, especially when a community repeats it often. That makes it a perfect container for navigation. A melody can hold a sequence of places like a spring, a ridge, a dangerous ravine, then a grove where fruit appears in season. Rhythm helps memory, and repeated phrases can mark key turns or warnings. A sum route can also teach children while they walk, so learning happens in motion rather than in lectures. This kind of mapping would be practical in landscapes that shift, since a song can be updated when a river changes course, or when a trail becomes unsafe. It also works across language differences, because gestures and place names can be shared, even when grammar is not. The idea is humble, yet it is powerful. Before ink, before paper, and before compasses, a human voice could draw a route through the world. A chorus could be a guidebook. Star knowledge, likely guided, travel long before compasses existed. When you sleep outdoors, the sky becomes familiar in a way most modern people never experience. Stars rise and set in patterns that repeat, and those patterns can become tools. A bright star near the horizon can mark a direction. A familiar constellation can tell you the season has turned. The moon's changes can help time gatherings, hunts, or long journeys. This knowledge does not require astronomy as a science. It requires attention and storytelling, since names and patterns help memory. Star guidance also works when landmarks vanish, like on open plains, deserts, or coastlines, where the world can look the same for miles. It can steady travel at night, when the air is cooler and water is easier to conserve. It also deepens culture. When people share the same sky, stories, they share a sense of order in a vast dark. Navigation and meaning can grow together. The sky becomes both compass and calendar, held above every camp. Early humans used caves, but many lived mostly in open shelters. Caves survive, that is why they can dominate our imagination. Yet, a cave is only one option, and it is not always the best. Many groups likely lived in open shelters built from branches, hides, grasses, hides, and stones placed where water and food made sense, rather than where rock happened to fall. Open camps can sit near game trails, river bends, or coastal resources. They can also be abandoned quickly when seasons shift, which matters for mobile life. The problem, for us, is that open shelters often vanish, leaving faint traces like post holes, stone rings, or scattered, half debris, that can make the past look more cave-bound than it truly was. Understanding this changes the feeling of early history. It moves humans into wider landscapes, under weather and sky, adapting structure to place. A cave can be protection, yet so can a well-built windbreak in the right spot. Home was not always a chamber of stone. A cave can be, often it was something made, then remade with hands and local knowledge. Coastal campsites are often underwater now, erased by rising seas. Many of the best places to live are near the coast. Fresh water meets salt water. Fish and shellfish are available. Travel is easy along shorelines. That means early humans liked to spend a lot of time there, especially during difficult climates. Then sea levels rose after ice ages ended. Shorelines moved inland, sometimes by miles. Camps, and that once sat above the tide were drowned, buried under sand, and scattered by currents. This creates a frustrating gap. Some of the most important evidence for migration and daily life may be hidden beneath waves where it is hard to survey. It also means our maps of the past can be misleading. A modern coastline is not the coastline early people knew. Their beaches may now be seafloor. Their river mouths may now be bays. When underwater archaeology does find traces, it can feel like opening a lost drawer of human history. The sea did not only carry boats, it also swallowed archives, and it keeps them quiet until the right moment of discovery. The earliest art was not only caves, but carvings and beads. Cave walls get the spotlight, yet portable art may have been just as important. A carved piece of bone, a shaped pendant, or a string of beads can travel with you, which matters for people who move often. These objects can also serve social roles. A bead can mark belonging. A carving can hold a story. A pendant can be a gift that seals friendship between groups. Making them requires time, steady hands, and materials that are chosen for color, shine, or rarity. That suggests people were thinking beyond survival in the narrow sense. They were investing in identity and meaning. Portable art also leaves clues about trade. Since a bead made from a far-off material implies contact and exchange, it can even hint at skill specialization, because some people may have become known as the best makers. In a world without writing, small objects can carry big messages. They turn beauty into a tool that fits in the palm. Venus figurines hint at symbolism, identity, or beliefs we still debate. These small figurines, often emphasizing certain body features, appear across parts of Ice Age Europe and beyond, and they continue to puzzle researchers. Some see them as fertility symbols, others see them as expressions of identity, ancestry, or social roles. Some may have been made by women, for women, as personal objects rather than public icons. Others may have been teaching a base, tools, heirlooms, or markers of group affiliation that traveled between camps. The variety matters. Not all figurines look the same, and not all were made from the same materials. That suggests multiple meanings rather than one simple answer. What is undeniable is intention. Someone chose to shape a human form and to carry it through time. That act places abstract thought deep in prehistory. It also invites a humbling truth. We can measure the age of these objects, yet we cannot fully recover the private thoughts behind them. The figurines sit on the edge between evidence and imagination. And that edge is where history becomes most alive. Hand stencils on cave walls are direct, human signatures across time. A hand stencil is one of the most personal marks the past can leave. Someone pressed their palm to stone, then blew pigment around it, and a silhouette stayed behind long after names were forgotten. It is not an abstract symbol. It is a real hand with real finger lengths, sometimes missing a tip, sometimes showing a bent joint. In some caves, you can see many stencils together, which feels like a gathering that wanted to be remembered. The act also required planning. Pigment had to be carried, a light had to be maintained, and the right wall had to be chosen. Some stencils appear deep inside caves where daylight never reaches, which makes the choice feel intentional rather than casual. When you look at one, you are not only seeing art, you are meeting a person who once stood there and decided, "I was here." Some cave paintings used perspective, shading, and motion with stunning skill. Many cave paintings are not simple outlines. They show animals with bellies rounded by shading, legs angled to suggest movement, and overlapping forms that feel like a herd in motion. Some artists used the natural bulges and curves of rock as part of the image. So, a horse's shoulder rises from the stone itself. Proms. This is a sophisticated way of seeing because it treats the wall as a partner. Light mattered, too. Under flickering torchlight, a painted bison can seem to shift as shadows move across it, which might have made the image feel alive during rituals or storytelling. The skill also suggests practice, since confident lines usually come from repetition. That raises an intriguing question. Rate. Did certain people become known as the artists of the group? Did styles pass from teacher to student? However it happened, the result is clear. These painters were not drawing like children. They were translating the living world into images with control, observation, and ambition. Pigments were engineered with binders, showing chemistry without textbooks. What? Color on stone is not only crushed rock. To last, pigment often needs a binder, something that helps it stick and spread. Early humans could mix ochre with animal fat, plant oils, egg, or water, depending on what was available and what effect they wanted. Some mixtures go on thick and opaque, others create a thin wash that stains the surface. Making these blends takes trial and error, because too much liquid drips and too little turns to dust. It also takes storage and transport, since pigment must be carried into caves or across open camps. This is Hansen chemistry. Learn it by observation. Heat changes properties. Grinding changes texture. Mixing changes durability. The fascinating part is the mindset. D. Someone noticed that one recipe worked better than another, then remembered it, shared it, and refined it. That is the heartbeat of science. Long before laboratories existed, torch smoke marks can reveal the routes people walked underground. Caves can be mazes, and deep passages are not places you wander by accident. When people carried torches, smoke and soot often collected on ceilings and along narrow corridors, those blackened streaks can become clues. They show which routes were used most, where people paused, and which chambers were visited again and again. In some places, soot patterns cluster near ledges or tight squeezes, as if groups gathered their carriage, adjusted their loads, and continued. Sometimes, the marks run like a dark ribbon along a ceiling, tracing a path that is still possible today. This evidence is powerful because it is unintentional. No one meant to leave a map. They simply needed light, and light leaves residue. Combined with footprints and tool marks, soot can turn a cave into a travel diary. It lets us follow ancient choices step by step into places that were once pitch black. Ancient hearths can preserve seeds, bones, and clues to nightly meals. A hearth is a small circle, yet it gathers an entire evening into one place. And people cook, eat, talk, and toss leftovers, and tiny traces fall into ash where they can survive for millennia. Burned seeds can reveal which plants were gathered nearby. Charred bone fragments can hint at what was eaten and how it was processed. Even the arrangement of stones can suggest whether a fire was built for warmth, cooking, or light. Sometimes there are repeated hearth layers in the same spot, which points to return visits and familiar routines. These traces make the past feel close because they capture ordinary life rather than dramatic events. You can almost picture someone turning a piece of food over coals or warming hands while a child dozes nearby. A half is not a monument. It is a habit. And habits are where human history truly lives. Moved, coelithites, fossilized poop, can reveal diet with awkward honesty. It is not glamorous, yet it is one of the most direct forms of evidence we have. When ancient waste dries or mineralizes, it can trap bits of the everyday, like plant fibers, parasite eggs, fish scales, or tiny bone fragments. That means researchers can sometimes identify foods that leave few other traces, including seasonal plants and small animals that were eaten quickly, discarded completely. Correlates can also show health patterns, since parasites and digestive stress often leave clues. The honesty is what makes it fascinating. A spear point can suggest hunting. Fossilized waste can confirm what actually ended up inside a body. It can even hint at cooking and preparation, since some ingredients become digestible only after processing. In the end, this evidence reminds us that prehistory was lived one meal at a time. Grand migrations and beautiful art are real, but so are stomachs, sickness, and the practical choices of dinner. Our immune systems still carry traces of ancient interbreeding events. When early humans met other human groups, the result was not only cultural, it was biological. Small segments of DNA entered the Homo sapiens gene pool, and some of those segments still influence how immune systems respond today. This matters because newcomers moving into unfamiliar regions faced unfamiliar microbes. Any inherited variant that improved defense could spread through later generations, not because it was perfect, but because it helped people survive long enough to raise children. Pravert. The trade-off is that immune changes can sometimes increase inflammation or sensitivity in modern environments. Evolution does not plan for future lifestyles. It reacts to immediate pressure. What makes this so gripping is the scale. A brief encounter, tens of thousands of years ago, can still shape how your body recognizes danger at the cellular level. On Pekind, your immune system is not only yours, it is a record of ancient exposures, ancient meetings, and ancient survival carried forward in every heartbeat. High-altitude genes in Tibetans link to Denisovan ancestry. Living high in the mountains challenges the body because thin air makes every breath less efficient. Many people develop dangerous complications at altitude, yet Tibetans often thrive with fewer of those risks. Genetic research has linked a key variant involved in oxygen response to ancestry connected with Denisovans, a group of ancient humans known mostly through DNA. The story is remarkable. OFA, a trait that may have evolved in one population long ago, was passed into another through interbreeding, then favored strongly in a high-altitude environment. It is evolution as a relay race, where one group carries a helpful adaptation, then hands it to another at the right moment in history. It also changes how we imagine human progress. Chest. Adaptation is not always invented from scratch. Sometimes, it is borrowed. In the thin air of the Tibetan plateau, a vanished human lineage may still be helping people breathe, day after day through inherited biology. Some skin and hair traits reflect adaptation to sun and climate. As humans spread into different environments, bodies faced new balances of sunlight, temperature, and available nutrition. Skin pigmentation is one of the clearest examples of adaptation since melanin, weakening, helps protect against intense ultraviolet radiation, while lighter D pigmentation can help vitamin D production in low UV regions. Hair also plays roles that go tortikamen, beyond appearance. It can help regulate heat, manage sweat, and protect the scalp from sun. These traits did not change because humans wanted variety. They changed because the environment rewards certain balances. The fascinating part is how quickly culture can outpace biology. Clothing, shelter, and diet can soften environmental pressures, which means not every region pushes traits in the same direction. Human diversity is not a set of separate boxes. It is a spectrum shaped by migration and local conditions, then blended again by later movement. When you see differences in skin and hair, you are seeing maps of sunlight and survival written onto bodies. Lactose tolerance evolved later, proving humans kept changing after farming. For most mammals, the ability to digest milk sugar fades after weaning. Early humans were likely the same. Then herring and dairying created a new food source, one that could be available even when crops failed. In some populations, genetic changes that kept lactates active into adulthood spread because they offered a nutritional advantage. Milk can provide calories, protein, and hydration, and it can be turned into foods that store well. What makes this fact so striking is what it says about evolution. Human history did not stop at the dawn of agriculture. Culture created new pressures, and genes responded. Different regions follow different paths, which is why lactose tolerance is common in some places and rare in others. This is a perfect example of gene and culture working together step by step. A change in how people lived reshaped what bodies could handle, and that change is still visible today in an ordinary glass of milk. Our immune systems still carry traces of ancient interbreeding events. Inside your cells, parts of your defenses were shaped by encounters your ancestors never wrote down. When early sapiens moved into new regions, they met unfamiliar microbes, and survival often favored bodies that reacted fast and flexibly. Some inherited immune variants can be traced to ancient mixing with other human lineages, and those fragments stayed because they helped in specific conditions. That does not mean they are always helpful now. A defense that once saved lives can also misfire in modern settings where pathogens, diets, and living density are different. What makes this so captivating is the timescale. A short period of contact long ago can still influence how your body recognizes threats today. Your immune system is not only a response to your own world, it is also a memory bank of older worlds, filled with echoes of ancient exposure, ancient survival, and ancient chance. High-altitude genes in Tibetans link to Denis ancestry. At high elevations, the air holds less oxygen, and the body must solve a hard problem with every breath. Many people struggle with headaches, fatigue, and dangerous swelling. Yet, some high-altitude populations show adaptations that reduce those risks. In Tibetans, one key genetic variant linked to oxygen regulation appears to have entered the human gene pool through ancient contact with Denisovan. This is evolution by inheritance across groups, not only by slow mutation within one group. It is also a reminder that ancient humans were not isolated stories. Their lives overlapped, and those overlaps could pass along useful biology. The mountain environment then acted like a strict filter, favoring traits that kept people healthier at elevation across generations. The result is extraordinary. A lineage known from fragments of bone and DNA may still be assisting living people every day, simply by making thin air more manageable. Some skin and hair traits reflect adaptation to sun and climate. As humans spread across latitudes, sunlight became a powerful force shaping bodies. In high UV regions, higher melanin levels help protect skin from damage and reduce risks linked to intense radiation. In lower UV regions, lighter pigmentation can support vitamin D production, which matters for bones and immune function. Hair also plays roles that go beyond style. It can help shield the scalp, manage heat, and influence how sweat cools the body. These traits did not shift because humans aimed for variety. They shifted because different environments reward different balances. What is most interesting is how migration keeps remixing those adaptations. People move, cultures connect, and traits that evolved in one setting can appear in another. Human variation is a moving mosaic, shaped by ancient climates, then reshaped by later journeys. Every strand and shade carries a history of sunlight, weather, and survival. Lactose tolerance evolved later, proving humans kept changing after farming. For most of human history, drinking milk as an adult was not the norm, because many bodies stopped producing lactase after early childhood. When some societies began keeping dairy animals, milk became a new resource that could buffer hard seasons. In certain populations, genetic changes that maintained lactase production into adulthood spread because they offered an advantage, especially where fresh calories and fluids mattered. In other places, cultural solutions reduced the pressure, like fermenting milk into foods that lower lactose levels. That is why lactose tolerance is uneven around the world today. What makes this fact so striking is the lesson it carries. Human evolution did not end with stone tools or with the first crops. Culture created new diets, and biology responded in some regions with measurable genetic shifts. Your ability or inability to digest milk is a living reminder that history keeps shaping the body. Long after the first farms appeared, the first humans likely saw auroras, comets, and eclipses with awe. Early humans lived under skies untouched by electric light. So, the night would have been thick with stars and startling events. An aurora could ripple like living color across the horizon, turning darkness into motion. A comet could appear for weeks, a bright stranger that slowly changes shape and then vanishes. An eclipse could steal daylight in minutes, chilling the air and confusing animals as if the world briefly broke its own rules. These sights would not be abstract. They would be felt in the body, in the hush of a group, in the way children press closer to adults. Memory. Such events likely became stories because stories are how people make the unknown manageable. Even without modern astronomy, careful observers could notice patterns, like the moon's rhythm and the return of certain stars. The sky would be both theater and teacher. It offered wonder, warning, and a sense that life belonged to something vast. Early humans faced pandemics too, though the evidence is hard to find. Disease rarely fossilizes, which makes ancient outbreaks difficult to prove. Yet, early humans were never free from infection. Bacteria, viruses, and parasites moved with people, with animals, and with water sources. Close living, shared food, and caregiving could spread illness quickly through a small band. A cough or fever could become deadly when food was scarce and nights were cold. Sometimes the clearest clues come from bones like lesions linked to chronic infection, or from ancient DNA that preserves traces of pathogens in rare B-tests cases. Genetics can also hint at past selection since immune-oriented genes often carry marks of intense pressure. What makes this topic so gripping is its intimacy. A pandemic is not only a medical event, it is a social storm that tests trust, care, and decision. Even in prehistory, sickness could change migration choices, break alliances, and reshape who survived to have children. A single stone tool can show handedness through its wear patterns. A tool is not only what it is how it was used. When a stone scraper or blade is held and worked repeatedly, it develops tiny scars, polish, and edge damage that can lean toward one side. Under careful analysis, those patterns can suggest whether the maker favored the right hand or the left. That sounds small, yet it opens a doorway into individual lives. Handedness links to brain organization, skill learning, and how tasks were taught. If a site shows a strong preference across many tools, it can hint at population-level patterns rather than one person's habit. It also makes the past feel personal. Instead of imagining early humans as a blur, even picture a specific worker gripping a tool the same way day after day, turning hide, shaping wood, or preparing food, where marks are quiet fingerprints. They tell you that someone's hands had a style, and that style left a trace. Children's footprints at sites prove that kids were present at daily life. A child's footprint is a rare kind of evidence because it captures a moment, not a tool or a bone. Small tracks preserved in mud, ash, or soft sediment show that children were not kept apart from the work of life. They walked where adults walked. They stood near hearths, followed paths, and sometimes ran, slipped, or turned suddenly in ways that feel instantly familiar. These prints also hint at learning in motion. Children likely watch tool-making, food preparation, and social negotiation up close, absorbing skills through proximity rather than formal lessons. A footprint can even suggest group composition since different sizes moving together imply mixed ages sharing space. This matters for how we imagine early society. Childhood was not a separate, protected bubble. It was woven into travel camps and daily decisions. When you see a small heel and toe pressed into ancient ground, you are seeing growth, curiosity, and belonging preserved by chance. The first humans were not primitive. They were inventive under pressure. It is tempting to judge the past by what it lacked. Yet, early humans were solving problems with whatever the world offered. They innovated in materials, in planning, and in social strategy. They learned to time movements with seasons, to share risk through cooperation, and to adapt tools to specific tasks. Innovation often happens fastest when failure is costly, and early life was full of high stakes. A poor shelter could mean hypothermia. A bad route choice could mean thirst. A failed hunt could mean hunger for children. Under that pressure, creativity becomes practical, not optional. It also becomes communal. Ideas spread through demonstration, imitation, and refinement, until a good solution becomes tradition. What makes this inspiring is the realism of it. These people were not superheroes. They were humans facing uncertainty, with minds built for pattern, memory, and teamwork. Their inventiveness is the foundation beneath everything modern. From engineering to art, to law, studying the first humans is really studying the deepest roots of you. This subject can feel distant, yet it keeps circling back to the present. When you learn how early humans moved, you learn why your body is built for long walks. When you learn how they shared food and cared for the vulnerable, you learn why social bonds shape health and survival, even now. When you learn how they marked identity, you learn why belonging still matters so intensely. The first humans also remind you that history is not only kings and battles, it is families choosing routes, children learning by watching, and communities making meaning under open, not skies. Their world was harsher than ours, yet it was filled with decisions that still echo in modern life. Studying them is like tracing a river back to its source. The water you drink today comes from that beginning, even if the landscape has changed. In their tools, their art, and their footsteps, you can recognize the earliest outline of your own mind. As we come to the end of our journey, notice how far we have traveled, not across oceans and deserts, but across time. We began in ancient Africa, where the first Homo sapiens took shape in a world of shifting grasslands, lakes, and drought. We followed migrations that spread across continents, and we lingered at camps where firelight stretched the night into a place for learning. We met other human lineages and felt the strange truth that some of them still live on inside our genes. We stood beneath Ice Age skies, watched art appear on stone, and listened for the first hints of music, rhythm, and story. We imagined the quiet work of hands, twisting fiber into cord, shaping stone into tools, stitching hides into warmth, and turning shared meals into cane. Community. And now you can let all of that drift into the forest background, like footprints filling softly with sand. Let the images fade in their own time, a hand against a cave wall, a small circle of light around a hearth, a long path along the river under stars. If you enjoyed this slow walk through deep history, you can support the channel by liking, subscribing, or leaving a comment. It helps these bedtime journeys find the people who need them. And if you are still awake, there will be another video waiting on the screen, ready to carry you onward into another story. For now, there is nothing else you need to do. Let your jaw unclench, let your shoulders settle, breathe in and out, and allow the day to loosen its grip, while your mind rests in the oldest chapter of human life. Sleep well and good night. And hune, as melty, pulse, 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 pulse.